Gotta stay hydrated. You need water. There are places in in the world struggling with water. Interesting that water, as our ice caps begin to melt on the planet, as the planet heats up, we're losing shoreline, and the ocean is encroaching on our land masses. Yet, water is still an issue. Clean water, right? As America, we have that privilege of clean water is essentially out of our tap. But even in America, there's some places where the tap water is contaminated, carcinogenic, and stuff like that. But we got plenty of water. We got bottled water and stuff. I like to drink flavored seltzer. That's been my staple for a long time now. Um, Very good stuff. And you can't forget some good Java as well. I'm Tomlin Snyback. Today is day 302 of 365 days towards racial change. I knew I was assertive, dedicated to this project, but to think 302 videos is quite impressive. Um, Talking about black issues, and we see how black um, can figures into the orientation of America. Um, hopefully through this you'll find, and I'll find some things I've learned about America, that America has, and the world essentially has drawn this line of judgment on people along the skin color lines, and that is the poorest way to judge and determine uh, the fitness of a person. Our founding fathers felt like it was ludicrous to think that a king's son was enough qualification to ascend to the throne of power, which they're right. You don't know what that guy could be retarded, mentally handicapped, sadistic, evil. You don't know. But just by birthright ascends to the throne. Judging by skin color is actually even less reliable than birthright. Skin color is just the wrong way to go to determine, but they did. Just a privileged group did it, promoted it, and stuff like that. Shouldn't be any surprise, but that's what we're talking about here. So we educate one another, give some feedback, try to keep our study factual, and be fair as possible as we can to all the parties involved, essentially blacks and whites, but we also take examples from other groups, Hmong, Vietnamese, Arabs, Hispanics, right? Some of these groups, Jews. As far as language, religion, there's other ways in which communities define themselves. Chinese, Japanese, even African communities, I would say, right? The Black Americans don't have a whole lot in common with Africa, except maybe our creativity, things of that nature. But for the most part, right, language, culture, religion, African, that's Africa. That's not been a part of my family for hundreds of years. white power um, has educated me, gave me a language, a religion, stuff like that, right? So yes, in some cases, blacks, Africans, right? People from India, right? Those communities are good examples of how to be closed, how to be loyal to your community, and have some unity and desire to rise up as a group. And you see it all over the place in America. Black people struggle with that. Maybe we're experiencing more peace. America's pluralistic approach to society and community is much better. I mean, where being racist and judgmental it really marks you as primitive and without, not clearly thinking in your mind is what I get. Right, like the town I grew up in was a small town, and we had our racists, right? But to be a racist in the town I grew up in, my town was very interracial, but you were considered primitive, a kook, freak, on the fringe, outside. You were not uh, um, you were not a force in the community, right? And so I think we see that nationally now, where it's not in vogue to be that. Although racism is kind of underground and it's still in the American soil and ready to infect and grow wherever it can find some fertile ground. Now, for Black people, we want to have this education. Like I had no idea some of the history we talk about. Um, some of things from slavery is still prevalent today, right? It's not just racism, but it's being confined to a space because of my skin color, right? How I had to come to this point of disillusion where thinking like the things I was taught in school and how to be and to expect from America turn out to be so false. I needed um, to be educated about these things, to be better armed, better equipped, right? The pressures I'm feeling from America and society, it's its restrictions upon me, how ancestral they are, where their sources come from, right? Black people need to know this, right? Um, why it's difficult to um, rise up, elevate, get through. I was watching one of my favorite shows, and one of the characters, beautiful white woman, right? She's one of my favorite characters, though, in this show. And the character is complaining that her father gets passed over for because of affirmative action and how Black women, and she's talking about the education system. Her father was a teacher and whatnot, and qualified to be a superintendent or principal, to be in more leadership roles. And listen, the system would be right if it was fair, but it's not. So you have to have some affirmative action or some favoritism. I mean, the white people are favorite, being favorites amongst themselves, right? So I won't get into that, but the character is complaining that her father is passed over for black women coming through, going rising up. And with the nature of the show and all that, they try to hit on a lot of important social issues. And that's one issue where that I was like, good, because this nation is incredibly exponentially in arrears to rightly compensating black folks um, for the work they've done in the nation, for the sacrifices they've made, for the oppression, the terrorism that they've been under, right? So, uh, see, that's America's issue, right? We don't applaud when the underdog finally has their day. We just look for more ways to exploit and stuff that. But if we would come together and rise up and be a nation, right? Not just when we're under war or under some kind of outside international global threat, but if internally we would come together, this nation would be so strong and prosperous. But we want to be capitalists. We don't want to be socialist, which means we want to rape our neighbors and we don't want to share. That's how I break down that argument. And because of that, the character in the show, right? It's fictional, but it's real. It's real to some degree. So when I see black people, a person rising up, then to some degree, it's not even earned; it's owed to black folks. On that note, economically, where you at, whoever you are, especially black folks, know that the society, community, American community, does not readily educate and prepare black folks for the long term. You got white people where their financial education, preparation for the long term, for living long, these are conversations they've had with responsible parents, in their teenage years, already mastering uh, the value of a dollar and its lesser value in the future, and how to invest energy, so much energy now, right? And to be focused with spending, saving, investment products, retirement products, things like that, right? If you're black and you've been taught that, well, here's a black person. I've had to self-educate myself, self-parent myself, ask questions of my white friends of these issues, because it's not taught in the black home. It wasn't talked about or taught in my black home. I know that, right? We had, all I saw was work, struggle, right? You didn't have any, um, you didn't have any sense of a environment that's going to foster education on important topics, right? And you got white power, white society that is always crushing in, and distracting the parents and the caretakers from educating the youth and their rightful that resource. So we know where it goes, why it happens and stuff like that. Now we just got to implement some strategies, to get young black people on the road and pathway as a community, as a group, towards financial independence, and being financially competitive in America. A lot of these topics, we go, there's, you know, hundreds of years of history and whatnot. I'm inspired to look at these things from a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. Read 3 of his works, and you can find him here on YouTube, and I'll tell you another place where you can check him out. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice, and Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America, Powernomics. You find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com. Behind me, you see the hashtag #us2 symbol. You'll find black women conversating, having their community and their group. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a black Facebook experience. More community. If you're a business mind, go see Dr. Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School. He'll be glad to interact with you as much as he can. He's a busy guy. If you can't find your flavor, then do what I did. Start your own little community grassroots here. It's the internet. Plenty of places to post stuff. And finally, if you've never read, please read Uncle Tom's Cabin. Fictional account of slave life in America, but those could get a lot of great talking points, and that book is informed by a lot of factual information. All right, today, 302, we're going to talk about sex in America, and we're just going to talk about the homosexual side of it, gay sex and things like that. Keep an open mind, because I want to, I don't even have any resources to inform me, so I've kind of filled in a little bit of my thesis here in a very creative way. Hang on with me, and we'll get through this. Because I noticed in America, through Uncle Tom's Cabin, Dr. Anderson, he consistently touches on this sexuality on the plantation, where the white slave master had his whole crop of virgin black women running around that he could go into, have at his beck and call, and have children. And you got South, especially Louisiana, right, filled with all these mulatto, quadroon, octoroon, light-skinned, beautiful people as a result of the white man going in to his helpless, defenseless black slave. And so I was wondering, like, history doesn't like to talk too much about that. Harriet Beecher Stowe in Uncle Tom's Cabin, she's extremely modest and careful about the language around that. So I said, well, what about the sex between a possible white slave master and the black male slave? Is there any connection there? Is there any possibility there? Well, the answer is yes, of course. I don't have any written evidence, any disclosure. I bet you if I really dug around history, I'd find something in there. But so I'm just jumping off a cliff here into homosexuality and male on male sex. Now, also, because of this resource I got from a great friend, a fan of racial change, called Drapetomania, it brings to light a relationship between black male slaves, which means, of course, there had to be some relationships between female slaves, female and female. So we want to let's break this thing wide open and go in with this thesis about uh, the male slave master and the male slave for a little bit here. Because listen, sexual expression on all kinds have existence since humans had sex, right? Don't be in this illusion of this perpetual heterosexual human race. I think today, and this is where I think America's getting it right, to open the doors. We got the LGBTQ plus rainbows and stuff like that, because it's just natural, I think, right? And it doesn't matter about your religion and stuff. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I will on the outset say that the gay friends that I have, that I respect and love, the ones that are in relationships, couples, married, they love each other. And I think that's a big difference between um, sexual behavior that we might object to. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, there's a movie called The Hurricane. It stars Denzel Washington. It's about a boxer, I think from North New Jersey, wrongly accused of a crime and thrown in jail. Right, but in the opening scene, this boxer's a little boy, and there's this white man who comes to where the black boys are playing, and he wants to entice the little black boys to come with him to be sexual. He's a pervert. He's a prowler. He's a predator, a gay predator. And the little boy, little hurricane, kicks the white man's ass, gets in troubles with the police, and this particular cop in the movie is the hurricane's nemesis through the whole movie. Uh, and that's kind of in the modern times, like 60s ish, late 50s at best. So you gotta think like white men, black men, all men, to somewhere have an attraction to other males. I found this website. It's PBS NewsHour or something like that. They did a special and talked about this, and they've got this nice chart. I think I not. Oh well, the link may be in the email to my private subscribers. It won't be in the description, uh, the YouTube description, because YouTube takes out links. You can't click on a link in a description on YouTube. Anyway, but if you look up PBS NewsHour and you look up gay, lesbian, sex timeline or something like that, anyway, you'll see it. So I picked out a few for, and I went to its earliest entry, 1624. A man named Richard Cornish of Virginia executed for homosexual conduct with a servant. 1677, Nicholas Sension of Connecticut. He confessed to having desire for males for over 30 years. He was on trial. 1777, Thomas Jefferson amended Virginia law to provide castration, a kind of mutilation in place of death, right? Because remember, it just said the first guy, 1624, was put to death for having this. 1856, Native American woman killed. She was from the Crow Nation, but she was killed somehow, leaving 4 wives. And it's, from my experience, it's pretty well documented that the Native Americans had a thriving gay culture um, when the um, when the Europeans and people started colonizing. And it's not the hypocrisy of America. America. It's always, you know, they they're objecting to something, but once they can package it and market it, then they come out with all these rights and resources and stuff like that. That's just, I don't like that about America. 1890, Frances Willard, um, uh, she's a female educator, suffragist. She comments on the prevalence of female homosexuality. And as late as 2003, we have Lawrence v. Texas, where the Supreme Court ruled finally, like, here's the pivot in America, where the Supreme Court ruled the autonomy of the self includes freedom of thought, belief, expression, and intimate conduct. All right. So what I'm saying is that the homosexuality, it's been a part of the land always, at all times. It's never, there's never, it's never been some purely heterosexual America, right? So on the plantation, there had to be instances, undocumented, of course, and you don't have males disclosing being violated. It's not as there's not a whole lot of communication around it as you would find females disclosing rape and being sexually violated, things like that. Males, it's an underreported statistic, is what I'm trying to say. Um, so it's not some far leap to think that the male slaves were not approached by white uh, masters in slavery America. It's definitely conceivable. Maybe if I do more research, I'd find it. But I was just sort of freeform on that subject. When I thought about sexuality in slavery America and how that, um, what's that mean in America today, right? I don't know. Like, since America has done its turn, and we've got a married gay man, openly gay, running for president. He's actually doing well in the polls. So America has come some distance there in its uh, relation to sex and whatnot. But it's interesting that even on that note, you still I still feel the racial tension there. It's almost as if America says, we've we're working on and working through our sexual issues, right? Environment, uh, and our politics and our economics, right? But these, once we peel back all those issues, what we still find underneath the hood is this racism discourse still clogging up the system, um, where one group is still coming out ahead and one group is still at a disadvantage. Would a black gay candidate, male or female, get as far as our white gay candidate? That's another interesting thing to think about. I want to finish just, if you are of kind of a faith of God and things like that, I would say I'm very familiar with what the Bible has to say around sexuality and gay homosexuality and things like that. I would say that God's problem mainly is with love or not, and whether or not the commentary is directed at behavior uh, that's putting one person at a disadvantage. If it's rapistic, right? If it's about, if it's totally devoid of caring, then I think we're closer to God's idea about it. I don't know. That's another long discussion. Conveniently over time, so I'm gonna let it go. Hey, I'm Tomlin's Nyback. Thank you for hanging out. I'd like to hear some feedback if you're interested, if you want, on Sex in America. That's day 302 out of the way. 365 days towards racial change. I'll see you next time.